Gets a fist to the stomach. A dog nearly gets choked out. An old couple get insulted in the worst way possible. And this is the one book in which Slappy doesn't really do a hell of a lot. That's right. So finally, after a long wait, we are here at the Night of the Living Dummy series. So, what can I say about this first book? Simply put, it's probably one of the better Goosebump books that came out in the original series. It has a really nice creeping atmosphere about it and would make one hell of a movie, pretty much. But in its, or in, okay, right, what's the best way to put this? I would have to go ahead and say that this really should have been a standalone book, and that if you were going to introduce Slappy at some point, you would have had to introduce him in a book of his own, not one which was actually connected to this, because this really it would work as a standalone novel. So the question is, would I recommend it for the kids of today to read it? Yeah, sure, definitely. If you want a nice creeping type of horror, sure, go for it. The only downside is that nothing really supernatural happens until halfway through the book. But that's as far as I can go without spoiling anything for those of you who haven't actually read it yet. So that brings us all the way over to Night of the Living Dummy 2. This one is far more action-paced in terms of the fact that the narrative is much faster than the previous one. And this one actually does feature Slappy pretty much taking center stage, since this one focused on Mr. Wood as the main antagonist, or bad guy. Okay, yeah, whatever. Moving on. So yeah, Night of the Living Dummy 2. Also, interestingly enough, I actually read this book first before I read this one, which was then followed by that, Night of the Living Dummy 3, and then followed by Bride of the Living Dummy. And that is also the order in which I saw the Child's Play films. I saw Child's Play 2 first, then saw Child's Play 1, Child's Play 3, and then Bride of Chucky. So it's weird how this sort of like parallel... weird about the whole parallel thing. But taking that to the side, before I begin, the sister in this is a major fucking bitch. The older sister in this one is also a major fucking bitch. And in all four of these books, the mom and dad are fucking assholes. But anyway, moving on from that, yes, Night of the Living Dummy 2, it's okay. It is an okay book. It's something that's definitely worth a read, but I wouldn't go on to say that it actually really breaks new ground or does anything that would be completely fascinating. And Slappy doesn't get as much time as you think he should, since he's actually on the cover of the book and everything. But you know what? It is still a decent entry within the series, so it's wouldn't be a hard recommend, but yeah, sure. If you've got some extra time on your hands and you want to check out what Night of the Living Dummy 2 is all about, then sure, by all means, go ahead. Check it out. Night of the Living Dummy 3. This is by far the one book that is a slog to get through. And mainly because it tries to grab the creeping element of the first book, but mixing it with the slight action-paced elements of the second book, but there is not one likable character in this one. The two characters, Trina, I think her name is, and Dan, God, man, they are such little shits. They are such little shits. Sarah, the older sister from this one, she's a fucking nun. And Lindy from this book, she's a fucking angel, compared to the two shitheads that we encounter in this book. To be honest with you, a lot of the Goosebumps books actually all have rushed endings. I'm surprised. Apart from this one. This one doesn't have that much of a rushed ending. This one seems to have taken its time to get to where it needs to go. This has a rushed ending. And this one also has a rushed ending, and none of the endings are completely satisfying in any way, shape, or form. So that is all I'm going to say about Night of the Living Dummy 3. I would go into more detail. But again, you don't really get to see any supernatural element until halfway through the book, which seems to be a running theme through all of the Night of the Living Dummy series. Also, Slappy back in the day seemed to be very, very menacing and seemed to be full of it. But upon rereading these books after such a long time, it's come to the realization that Slappy is not as nasty as he could be. There's so much potential there for this character, and we don't get to see that much of it being on display. Maybe that might change in some of the later books, because I know that there is a Slappy World series or something of that nature in existence. So this brings us to Bride of the Living Dummy, which of course is part of the Goosebumps series 2000. I only ever picked up the first 2 books in this series, because by this point I'd moved on to other things. Now, again, this book is not entirely bad. It does actually have its moments and stuff. However, it does tend to repeat a number of things that we've already seen in the previous series, such as the spewing of the green gunk, the Slappy turning up at the breakfast table the next day after they try to get rid of him. But this book also has inconsistencies. There are quite a few inconsistencies in this, because in this book, again, it is supposedly revealed later on that Slappy doesn't come to life until much later in the book. Yet earlier on in the book, there are scenes where he's actually seen to be able to do things independently on his own. And we also get an origin story for this book. We also, not this book, an origin story for Slappy. The ending is on the slightly predictable side of things, but if you're looking for something a little bit darker and edgier, you can't really go wrong with Bride of the Living Dummy. It is definitely a step up above Night of the Living Dummy 3 and Night of the Living Dummy 2, although this character, this female doll, I can't be bothered to remember what her bloody name is, she's not all that fantastic as a memorable character, and the way they actually conclude the battle between the dummy and the doll, it's not exactly all that great either. Oh yeah, and this is also the book in which Slappy for the first time has a completely different outfit. Rather than have the typical suit which we normally see him in, he's actually wearing some sort of checkered sports jacket or something of that nature. But overall, if you take this book and you take this book, these two, Bride of the Living Dummy and the original Night of the Living Dummy, and you actually take the backstory of how Slappy came into existence from this one, and you take the general premise from this one, put it together, you could actually have a pretty good dark take of a Goosebumps story that is aimed at an older audience. The teenage kind. Anyway, I guess I'll bring it to an end at that point, since there's really nothing else to say, because I don't want to ruin any of these books for you if you decide, hey, I want to read them myself and see what's what. Right then. Time to move on.